Hey everybody, Shane here, Shoebox Legends. Thanks for joining me today for a vintage hockey by request episode. I've had a couple of folks ask recently to see some vintage hockey here on the channel. I know my buddy Ken over at Ken's Cardboard and my buddy Kin over at Bean's Ball Card Blog, among others, have asked to see some old school hockey cards here on the channel. So I've picked out maybe 15 or so, 15 to 20, somewhere in that range that we're going to look at today. Some of these we've looked at on the channel in the past, but it's been a while. I've really been focusing on baseball over the last year or so. Then I have a few new to the channel vintage hockey cards at the end that I've never shown off before. And I figured as a treat for Ken and Kin and others, we'd get into some new ones. But before we see the old school hockey, I wanted to look at these two cards quickly again. I had received these recently from my pal Peter B. in a care package that was actually from his dog Leo to my dog Leo. And now that they are out of their packaging and in new cleaned up top loaders, these things look even more incredible. So I wanted to bust them back out. Number 4, Bobby Orr. This is essentially a refractor from O-Pee-Chee Platinum, but how awesome is that? And then this card really blew me away once it got cleaned up here. Look at this upper deck stature. This is an alternate photo variation numbered to 99. I found out when I added it to my collection on the trading card database, but just a glorious, glorious Bobby Orr card. And I thought these would be a nice way both to give Peter another nod because these are really, really fantastic cards, but also to serve as a segue, as the first vintage card that I pulled out is in fact a Bobby Orr. Check this out from the 72 Topps release. This is the Bobby Orr All-Star card. Now, the players in this set would get a base card and then a separate All-Star card, similar to think baseball in the late 1950s, through the 1960s, 2 separate cards. And the All-Star card, just like in baseball, is a little bit cheaper and less desirable than the base card. But I love this one because it features, I believe, 2 other Hall of Fame players for the LA Kings in the background, Harry Howell and Rogie Vachon, who's a Hall of Fame netminder. Just a great shot there. Love the photograph, and for that reason, this has always been one of my favorite Bobby Orr cards. I've had this for a long time, as you can tell by, this really, really old flip. I probably bought this, more than a dozen years ago, and yeah, it matches nicely. I should have mentioned this at the outset, but put a couple cards up in the background from when they used to do trophy cards in the Topps and O-Pee-Chee sets back in the day. That was something that didn't last long, but a couple different versions of those exist from, the late 60s, early 70s. They're just really, really gorgeous, colorful cards. And I love the Stanley Cup and really all the trophies in the sport of hockey. So thought those would make a nice background or backdrop for today's video. Next up, so that was a Topps All-Star Bobby Orr. But in the same year, 1972, O-Pee-Chee, in their high numbers at the very end of the checklist, they included cards for the WHA, which was a rival startup league to challenge the NHL. On the checklist for the NHL set, which is crazy to me. So like the first, 3, 4 series were all NHL players on the same design, just like Bobby Orr or the Stanley Cup in the background. But then in the high number series, they included the competitor league. And I'm sure that must have definitely not been too pleasing to the folks in the NHL. It was the only year that they would do that. So the WHA existed throughout the 70s before ultimately merging into the NHL. But for all of the remaining years, O-Pee-Chee did a separate WHA set and did not include the cards right in the same base set as the NHL counterparts. So I really love these first year cards for that reason. And this is a cool one here from the Minnesota Fighting Saints, Fred Speck. I don't know anything about him, but love that card nonetheless. I'm somewhat infatuated with the WHA. It's a really, really interesting league and story. Speaking of which, here's one of the teams that survived from the WHA and merged into the NHL in this very season, 1979. This is the O-Pee-Chee Gordie Howe. Now, this card is awesome for a variety of reasons. First year of existence of the Whalers, my hometown team in the NHL, and Gordie Howe's final playing days card. And what's crazy about this, he was over 50 years old when he played this final year with the Hartford Whalers. This is also very recognizable as the Wayne Gretzky rookie set. 1979-80. So for a variety of reasons, I think this is the greatest hockey set ever produced. The card backs are another one of those reasons. I mean, look at that skate back. Just so awesome. Probably my favorite backs on any hockey card ever created. And these are not expensive, these Gordie Howes. So while getting a Wayne Gretzky rookie from this set might be a challenge for an average collector these days, the Gordie Howe is really, really cheap. So I recommend this if you're looking for a sneaky good vintage hockey card that I think every collection should have. Check out the 79 Gordie Howe. You can also get this in Topps version. So Topps and O-Pee-Chee would put out sets just like in baseball. It's a little bit inverted in that in hockey, O-Pee-Chee is the more desirable and pricier of the two releases. So if you want something a little bit cheaper, you can get a really nice, even graded version of this Gordie Howe from the top set for, $50 in a relatively good grade. So highly recommend that Gordie Howe. We'll see a couple more of his cards later in the episode. Here's another one that I've shown before, but I just thought I would drag it back out because I really dig this one. A triple autograph featuring Phil Esposito, Johnny Bucyk, and Bobby Hull, the Golden Jet, on the 70-71 goal leaders card. So these are the top 3 goal scorers in the league in 1970-71, and all 3 hard signed this. It was authenticated by SGC. I don't think they do that anymore, but really great card. At some point, maybe I'll convert this over to PSA DNA, but I don't really care that much about the holder. I just want to know that it's authentic. And I think having a multiplayer goal leader card signed like that is just really, really cool. Kind of reminds me of the 3-player home run leader card that I recently picked up on the baseball front. Next up, I have 2 here that I'm actually going to look to sell. And I'll be listing these in the coming week or 2 to try to build up towards this big card I'm saving for. The first, and they're both Gordie Howe cards from his time with the Red Wings, which is how I remember him. He played with Detroit from all the way back in like the late 40s, I think, all the way through the early 70s. Then he moved over to the WHA. So great card here from 1970, Topps Hockey. But for me, it's a little bit more OC than what I'd look for. Again, bought this probably 15 years ago. Left border, very thin. Right border is a little bit thicker. So it's definitely OC left to right and top to bottom, but a pretty high grade of an 8. So I'll be listing this one in the near future. And then to go along with that, the very next year's Gordie Howe from 71-72 Topps Hockey. And again, listing this one primarily because it's off center. Now these can be tough, but the way to judge centering on the 71-72s are the little gap right where this, circular portrait inset rubs up against the left and right borders. And if you look here, you can tell this border is much thinner on the left than it is on the right. So this card is a little bit OC, left to right. Other than that, a gorgeous example. I bought these, back in this day, 15 years ago, I was just buying the grade. I was relatively new to the hobby and to graded cards, and I knew that a PSA 8 would, do pretty well and probably retain its value. Not that I spent much on these cards. These were probably $30 or $50 pickups, and I'm sure thanks to the magic of grading, I'll be able to unload them for at least what I paid for them or more when it comes to saving up for that big card. So there's 2 Gordies that'll be hitting eBay in my store in the near future as I continue my purge and condensing here. Next up, from the same set as the Gordie that we just saw, but this is the O-Pee-Chee version, the Marcel Dionne rookie card. This guy is like a top 10 scorer in league history, but he gets very little love. I think the average sports fan who's not an NHL fan probably hasn't even heard of him, but this is his rookie card. And unlike that Gordie that we saw, this one is very well centered. You can see just about perfect on the 2 edges there. Really important hockey rookie, and I think this is a great card for the grade from O-Pee-Chee. Nice bright back. And you can find this for, sneaky, it's kind of a sneaky cheap card considering the career that he put together. So this is one that I targeted maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and that's definitely my forever copy of his rookie. While I was kind of on that kick, this is an even bigger card. I picked up the Phil Esposito. We saw him on the triple autograph card a moment ago as the goal leader for the Bruins in the 1970 season. This is his rookie card from 1965 Topps Hockey, an incredibly tough card to find centered and without snow, because this blue background is so bold that any snow or defects really stick out. And I searched for probably 2 or 3 years before I found this copy. Even this was not cheap in a 5, and the reason I got a 5, right here on the border, you can see there's a little chip in the border of this card, but it is beautifully centered and presents amazingly well. And this is a card that could be frustrating to find in condition that looks anything like this. A sneaky good, one of my best hockey cards, I would say. Vintage hockey cards, anyway. Here's one last Gordie Howe. And this is one that I will be keeping from 1967 Topps because it's a more recent pickup, and as such, I was more aware of centering and visual appeal. So this is just a great base card from 67 Topps Hockey, featuring the man himself. I don't have a complete Gordie run or anything like that, nor do I aspire to one. I'm not really into player runs these days, but happy to have a few of his cards anyway. Here are 2 more that are probably going to join the for sale pile. And again, just because they're a little bit OC or don't really fit my collecting interest these days as well as they did, back when I bought them. 52 Parkhurst Milt Schmidt and 54 Parkhurst Jim Henry. So 2 Bruins there on the Parkhurst design. For those who aren't vintage hockey collectors, Parkhurst was similar to Bowman in the baseball realm in that they existed, late 40s through early 50s. Actually, I think they only existed in the early 50s. There weren't any 40s Parkhurst sets, but early 50s competitor or existed before Topps was really doing hockey, and had odd size cards as well. So a lot of similarities between Parkhurst and Bowman. And Milt Schmidt here is a Hall of Famer and one of the all-time great Boston Bruins. So that's kind of a really cool card there, especially in a 6.5. Again, but most of these a long time ago. Have not been picking up nearly as much vintage or graded hockey in the recent past. Here's a cool one that I'm holding on to that I've had for a while now. 1933. We're going all the way back to the 30s here. This is a Worldwide Gum Normie Himes. Now again, not familiar with him as a player, but I just think having any card from 1933 featuring that game that I love, ice hockey, is just priceless. And what's really cool about this is a New York Americans sweater that he's wearing here. A team or a franchise that doesn't exist in that format anymore. And you can really see in this photo why hockey jerseys are alternately referred to as sweaters, because back in the day, the jersey literally was a sweater. So just a really cool card. I picked this up for like 20 bucks back in the day because it's a lowly 2 of a player that nobody cares about, but I think it's visually striking. I love that it's the pre-helmet era, and he's got kind of that Newsboys cap on. Just a really great photograph, and the back is clean as well. I can pause that if you want to read a little bit about Normie. So that's a nice card from the 30s. Sticking with the 30s for another card here. This is one that I picked up ungraded, and then I submitted to SGC, a Busher Jackson for the Toronto Maple Leafs from 1937 O-Pee-Chee. Now this got a 2, which I knew it would because it does have some glue issues on the back, although they don't in any way interfere with the actual product on the card, the printing or the write-up at all. They're really confined to the corners and the borders where there really isn't any ink. So just a great looking copy. And I picked this up because I was researching the older eras of the game and the players that I was less familiar with. And I think Busher Jackson was one of, if not the top scorer in the NHL in the 1930s. So pretty cool to find that. Got this for under $50. And thanks to SGC's cheap grading, even got it graded all in for under $50. So pretty pleased with that one. And then here's one from one of the first ever hockey releases. So just like the T206 in the baseball realm, there were a couple very early tobacco-sized and tobacco hockey sets. They're referred to as the C55 and C56 cards. They came out in the very early 1910s. That standard, tobacco dimension. Again, I don't know anything about Bruce Stewart. I just picked this up because I wanted some representation in my collection of the history of the hobby. And in the same way that I want to have just a couple random T206 cards on the baseball side of the house to represent, that fad from 100 plus years ago. Wanted to have a hockey version as well. So ended up with this Bruce Stewart, a little bit of a ratted back there, but again, this is a 1 and it was cheap. And it's just really cool to have something that's, now closing in on 120 years old, 115 years old anyway. So really cool card there. And then as far as the cards I've already shown, we'll finish with this one. I just really, really love the image on this. It's a posed shot here of Canadiens netminder Charlie Hodge in goal from the 59 Parkhurst release. So I mentioned, a lot of similarities between Parkhurst and Bowman. One difference is that Parkhurst lasted a lot longer in competition with Topps and O-Pee-Chee, going all the way into the 60s. But just a beautiful, beautiful shot there of a netminder with the wooden stick from the no mask era. Just love this. I'm a Bruins fan by geography, but I love the Canadiens. They're sort of like the New York Yankees of the NHL, and I just can't not love a team with that much success and history. And speaking of which, that's probably a good segue now into the 3 cards that I've never shown on the channel before of the vintage variety. We're going to start with another Montreal Canadiens netminder, Lorne Worsley, affectionately known as Gump. Gump Worsley, longtime netminder. And this is just a beautiful base card out of 1968-69 Topps Hockey. They all have sort of these standard backgrounds, colorized backgrounds, and then a normal color photo of the players superimposed on the front. But just a really clean design. And I'm a sucker for goalie cards. I love goalie cards in hockey the same way that I love catcher cards in baseball. And of course, we had glorious cartoons on the back in the 50s and 60s. So that's the first card that I've never shown. The second vintage hockey card that's never been shown before, it's a more recent pickup, maybe from a year or two back now. The 1978 O-Pee-Chee Stanley Cup Finals, representing the Canadiens winning their 3rd straight cup, which is awesome. One of the great dynasties in ice hockey history were the Canadiens teams of the mid to late 70s. They sort of took the mantle from the Broad Street Bullies, Philadelphia Flyers teams around the middle of the decade, won consecutive cups, and were the dynasties sort of before the Islanders and then the Oilers, who were the successive dynasties to come along in the 1980s. So great shot there of Larry Robinson, Hall of Fame defenseman, alongside the greatest trophy in sports. Mentioned it with these in the backdrop towards the outset of the video, but just a total sucker for any card featuring Lord Stanley's Cup. We'll put this one up in the background here. And then that takes us to the final card in today's video. This is from the first ever O-Pee-Chee hockey set. So O-Pee-Chee exists to this day. It's now owned by Upper Deck, but O-Pee-Chee flagship hockey is still made all the way here in 2024, but it started back in 1933. So this is a 33-34 O-Pee-Chee George Patterson. What a card. This is graded a 2 because it does have a surface crease that you can see here, going just sort of through his skates. But again, I love the look at that old sweater. I mean, look at that stick. Holy cow, that does not look like anything you'd be able to score a goal with in the modern NHL. Really dig the design. They have multiple colors in this set. There are bright yellows, bright greens, reds, and then the player is always done in black and white with a simple nameplate along the bottom, but just gorgeous looking cards. They're a little bit different than your standard size, which was a trend with early O-Pee-Chee. We saw this 1937 O-Pee-Chee earlier in the video, but this inaugural release back in 33 was sort of elongated, a little bit taller and a little bit narrower than what we think of a standard trading card being today. So George Patterson, these have very plain backs, but again, all legible. And this is one I've had in my collection for probably 15 to 20 years, but until now, never had an excuse to really drag it out and show it off here on eBay. So thank you to Ken and Kin and all my other hockey collecting buddies for giving me an excuse to kind of get up off my butt and show some vintage hockey here. I'm going to cut it there. I'm at almost 20 minutes, which is way longer than I like to go. But I do have some more vintage hockey here backlogged, including some bangers that I've never shown on the channel. So maybe over the course of the winter, we'll do some more hockey-themed episodes. But for today, that's a wrap. Truly appreciate your time, and I'll be back soon with some more content, as you know. Until then, take care and enjoy the hobby. See ya.